without getting cut off. A few things. We'll talk about the content of the movie and how to use it in your film analysis paper. But yeah, do you have a question, Joanna?
Oh no, sorry.
Oh no, okay, no problem. I just want to make sure. But first, I want to talk about the prompt and a few of those things that um, kind of business kind of things. Uh, so the main thing is that you're writing a 2 to 3 page paper on this movie, right? I can never just let you watch a movie without anything having to write anything on it. And it's answering the prompt is you're going to analyze one of the characters in the film and talk about how they react to the Nazi regime and why, right? So that's the part that is open to interpretation, in which you can make any kind of argument you want. And I fully expect that people will make very different kinds of arguments there, right? Also, somewhere in your paper, you should address the question of what the movie is arguing about violence, if you think it's arguing anything at all, right? If you don't think it's arguing anything at all, then you can say that. But just somewhere in your paper, maybe that's somewhere where maybe in the introduction to help lay out what's happening, you could put that in, or in the conclusion would be another good place to address the issue of what is the movie trying to say about violence, right? Let me check the chat if it loads. Yes, and we'll talk about the obvious character is Lucien, who's the main character to write about, and you can absolutely write about him. But there's a couple of other side characters that are also possible to write about. So this paper does need a thesis. It's not going to be a straight just summary of what happens in the movie. You can assume that I've already watched the movie, so you don't need to give a lot of setup of what is happening or what it's about, unless it's helpful to make your argument, right? So your thesis should involve whatever character you're choosing to write about. So a bad thesis is a thesis that is too descriptive, not argumentative enough. So this is my example of a bad thesis. The film, La Comme Lucienne, shows the reasons why some people chose to collaborate instead of resisting Nazi occupation of France. So I'm telling you, this is a bad one. It's not an incorrect statement, right? There's nothing wrong with the sentence itself, except that it's a description of what's happening. Right? It's a description. It's not making an argument, right? The way to make that into an argument is to focus on a character specifically and tell me what are their motivations, right? So this would be a better version of that sentence to make it into a thesis. Lucien joins the Nazi regime because he has nothing to lose, and the collaboration with the German police gave Lucien something he never had: a home, money, and power. This is not a perfect sentence. There were things that if I were giving feedback to the student, I would change the wording a little bit in here. But as an argument, it works. There's nothing wrong with this as an argument. Why? Why am I saying that this sentence works better than that other one?
It's more specific. It has actual reasonings.
Yes, it's specific. It mentions the character and it gives me the motivations for the character. So it's addressing the prompt and it's arguable, right? Like I could argue that his reasons are actually different than these, right? I could say, nope, it's actually just power that's motivating him, or it's just money. Or I could totally scrap all of these and I can say it's actually about masculinity for him. We'll talk about some of these elements later, but you can change this. These things can be argued against, and that makes a good argument, a good thesis statement, right? I did put on here, don't use this exact thesis. Every time I give examples of what a good thesis is, there's always one person that tries to just copy and paste it. And I'm telling you that this is not a perfect sentence. So you don't even want to use it exactly. You want to pick your own ideas. What do you think is really happening with Lucien, for example, right? And we can work on like what other things you can say about different characters. The other thing I want to make sure I go over with you all is citation. because in that first paper that you all wrote for me, I let you write in or cite in whatever style you wanted to. And what I found out is that a lot of you think you know how to cite MLA style, but you don't really. I don't think anybody really teaches us citation a lot of times. They just expect us to figure it out. And so, what I'm going to do with this paper, because you're only citing one thing, you're citing the movie, is I'm going to teach you, I'm going to ask you to cite Chicago style, and I'm going to teach you how to do it. Right? History majors, how easy is it to use Chicago style?
I still know how to use it.
Okay, this is why I'm gonna ask you all to use Chicago style in this one, because you're citing one thing. So really all we're gonna practice is inserting footnotes, right? I'm giving you the citation, and I've actually gone ahead and included the citation in the prompt in the Canvas link. This is what your citation is, right? It's the name of the movie, directed by, and then you don't have the DVD information, but I own the DVD for it, and this is the information from it. It came out in '74, but the DVD was a 2006 release from the Criterion Collection, right? So that's it. Like that's the main information you need. The key with Chicago style that makes it different from MLA or APA is that in Chicago style, you don't put a parenthetical citation at the end of the sentence. You don't put anything in parentheses. Instead, what you do is you use a footnote. You can use endnotes, but I find footnotes to be very useful, and people tend to like them the most. So let's say you have there's a quote in the story that you really like and you want to use that in your paper. Great. You put the quote in quotation marks, and then at the end of the quote, you leave your cursor at the end of the sentence, and then you go to references. This is on Word. On Word, you go to references. This is the latest version of Word. I think mine's updated. And then you go to insert footnote. If everybody sees this button over here, don't get distracted by insert endnote or next footnote or any of these other things over here. Like it can format it for you if you give it information. Don't get distracted by any of this. Click insert footnote, because when you click on that, what it does is it puts this number 1 at the end of your sentence. And then it creates this space at the bottom of the page for you to insert the information you're citing. And all you have to do is really go into the prompt and copy and paste what I've already given you. You just copy and paste this exact format. You don't have to give me a timestamp. You don't have to give me anything else, just the exact information I'm already giving you here. Now, another thing that can be confusing is what to cite, right? So I'm going to erase this. So things that are a direct quotation from the movie is more obvious. You cite that, right? But the other thing that you do need to cite is plot. When you're just talking about what happened, Lucien does this or he does that, that's plot. And that's coming from the movie and should be cited. So I'm going to show you, I wanted to say that and then show you how to do it again. So again, you go to references, you click insert footnote, and then see it did the 2 at the end of the sentence, and it created a space to include the citation information. Because we're only using one thing, you're only citing the film, every single thing you cite after the first one where you have to include all the citation information, after that you can just do IBID. I'm making it big so it's visible. IBID is the shorthand for when all of these things had to be written out or typed in a typewriter. Instead of typing everything out again, they came up with this shorthand, which means the one right above. So literally, like every other sentence, let's say I have another sentence that's brilliant plot summary. I go back to references, insert footnote, and then all the rest of my citation can just be IBID. Because there's no timestamp or page number needed in this, the rest of them can just be IBID, period. So it should look like this. That's how your paper should look. Obviously, you're not gonna enlarge the font on this, so it's not actually gonna take up this much space, but it is gonna take up a little bit of space down here. Does that make sense, or are there questions right now?
I have a question. Do we need to use citations, or is it's an option?
No, you need to use citations. You do need to use them. I'm making you in this one because because it's a more formal paper than the reading responses, and mostly just to practice using this Chicago style. Because most people wanted to use MLA in the other one, and that was fine. I have no problem with MLA, but I want you to at least try to do the Chicago style because we're only citing one thing. It's fairly easy, and it gives you the experience of it without having to do multiple things.
Oh, okay. Do you know how to do that in a Mac?
Yes. Yes. So hold on. I'm going to show you these in the other ones. So IBID, it literally means the one right above. It's Latin for the one right above. So for somebody looking at the citations, it's just telling them that I'm citing the exact same thing in the previous footnote shows. So I'm not currently on a Mac, but on the Pages, if you're using Pages, which is the default app on the Macs, what you will need to do is actually the exact same thing as what one uses on a Google Doc. So I want to show you on a Google Doc. Plus, I think a lot of you use Google Doc. And it's just as simple, if not more simple, to cite on a Google Doc. So let me show you. It's lovely. Okay, so let's say I have this initial quote or plot summary at the beginning. Let me make this big so that it's visible. So you put, again, the cursor at the end of the sentence after the quotation marks. On a Google Doc and on Pages, you go to Insert. Insert, and then you scroll down to Footnote. This is the same thing on Pages, right? So I'm going to do that. I'm going to click. And you see it made the one at the end of the sentence, and then it created the space at the bottom. Now, what do you put? Yeah?
Because I do know how to use the footnotes as well, but I think my problem is that going back, because it seems like you have to do it in order. Is there a way that you can go back and make a footnote without making it number 16? You know what I mean? When the rest of the quotes are like 1 through 6.
Yes, so you can. So let's say right here, right? Let me insert a footnote, because some of you, if you're not citing as you go, then you might be doing them out of order. Yeah. So let's say I did 1 and I did 2, and hold on, let me put in here just to show everybody again on here. You're just gonna go to the prompt or to the PowerPoint, copy and paste that. Go back to the doc. Sorry, I pasted it wrong. See, when you just copy and paste, it creates these problems. So you might have to adjust the settings, but there we go. Okay. And then for number 2 would be IBID, right? So now I want to go back and insert this one, cite this one. You would just do the same thing. I just go insert and then footnote, and it actually changes the numbering. Do you see how it changed number 2 to a 3? So the system does automatically redo the numbering. It redoes the numbering for you. So Cairo, so for this one, because you're not citing multiple things, you're just citing the one movie, you don't have to worry about as much about it. just go ahead and on at the end of the sentence, right? Go to insert footnote, and it will adjust the numbering so that it's in the correct order.
Professor, so the first one is going to be the citation of the movie, and then the rest of them is just going to be IBIT?
Yep.
Oh, okay, perfect.
The rest of them are just, this is why I'm like, I'm asking you to do Chicago style, because in this version of it, when you're just citing the movie, it's super easy, right? You're just going to be citing the one initial movie as information, and then everything else is IBIT. And again, it's the same thing in Pages. I don't currently have the Pages app on my computer, but I've had it in the past, and it's the same thing. It's insert and then footnote. Let me stop sharing and let's see. It reorders itself. So yeah, it does. So so Cairo, it just did it on my Google. So if
Yeah, maybe it's just my computer because I would have to go back and delete all of the footnotes in order to put them back in order. Because I usually would use the keyboard because you know how it has like
shorthand
or something. But okay, maybe I have to go and manually do it that way.
Maybe if you're going back at the end and doing all the citation, do it in the order. And actually, if it's out of order, if everything, as long as it's numbered, it's fine. Right, because you're only doing the full citation on that first one, and then everything else is IBIT. So if the number is off a little bit, it doesn't matter. Yeah, like, and I don't need you all to get it perfectly, although I'm hoping for that for this one, because it's so simple that most of you will get it down nicely in this first try. But literally, if you get stuck on this and you're trying to figure it out, you can just email me. You can just email me, and I will I can explain it over email really quickly. I don't even have to do much for it. Or the other thing I can do is I have a couple of guides on here. So in the actual assignment, right, on the link here for the film analysis, I just went in today and added a few things. I added the PowerPoint that shows you, I have screenshots of how to insert a footnote on Google Docs, on Word, and I think I actually have the Pages screenshots as well here. And I have the actual citation right here. Right? So if you get stuck, come back to the prompt. And I've tried to put as much of that here. But if you send me an email, I'm happy to recap it again over email. Like it's the easiest thing to do. A lot of times if I get an email, could you please repeat how does one cite? I can type it up even on my phone, and it's like super simple for me. But I understand why it's not for a lot of you, right? If you've never used Chicago style, if there are issues with the device you're using, anything like that, then it might not be super easy. And I'm happy to demonstrate it. Other questions on citation right now?
Yeah, Professor, I have a question. So if you go ahead and do the full citation in that first footnote, then you don't, oh, well, I guess this is my question. Then do you have to make like a little bibliography and put the full citation in that at the end?
Normally you do, but I am not requiring, you're only citing the movie, so it would be kind of a waste of time to then create a works cited or a citation page. So I tend to just not care about that stuff. Normally you do, the official rules say you do, but no, don't worry about that for me.
Okay, got it. Yeah, just because when we wrote the last paper, I read like there was two different ways you could do it. You could do like a shortened citation and like the footnotes, and then you would have like the full list with the full citations at the end, or you could do like the full citation and the footnote or whatever. So I was just wondering which one of those. Okay, so I see now.
Yeah, for this, I'm like, this one, you're only citing the one thing. And now here's the thing. Some of you are really smart and you're like, let me see what people said about this movie online. Let me see what reviewers said. And you will find some stuff online on the movie, even though it's an old French movie. You can do that, read it. If you find something in a review that you like and you want to use, that's perfectly fine. You just have to cite it. If it was not your idea and it was somebody else's idea, even if you're paraphrasing it, you should cite the review for a couple of reasons. One, if you found a review, it's online. So if you try to copy and paste an idea into your essay, that's the easiest thing that Turnitin will flag as, an issue, as a plagiarism issue. So don't do that. Usually most of you are smart enough to not do that. But the other reason why you don't want to just steal something without giving it proper credit is because I've done that. I've read almost every review I've been able to find online on this movie. Because it's a movie that really interests me, and because I wanted to see what was available for you guys to find online. Some of the reviews are good, and you might want to take something for it, but it's not a movie that's well known or well reviewed. So usually I can tell that I remember that reviewer said this about this movie. So it's actually why I like using, yeah, don't bullshit it. It's why I pick a movie that's a foreign movie and an old foreign movie. As I know it's not as easy to find stuff on it. I'm more interested in your ideas anyway, right? You can, by the way, even though next week is spring break, we don't have classes next week. If you want to use a life happens class, I have no problem. If anyone ends up, having an emergency and you need extra time, that's not going to be a problem, right? I don't want to give you work over spring break. And I'm hoping that this is something that's easier to complete before then. But if you end up needing more time, then you need more time. That's it. So, okay, let's get to the weird French movie then. You notice a lot of it is kind of doesn't contain dialogue. It's just scenes. Like a lot of the beginning is just setting the scene of what kind of life Lucien has. So for those of you that have already seen it, what do you think about Lucien at the beginning?
Honestly, Dr. Cardone, in the beginning, I just knew that this person was I think a bit disturbed, because I mean, you see Lucien taking joy in murdering animals, well, I mean given like maybe some of it was for food, right? But like the chickens and the rabbits, but it was yeah, you see like that face and that smile, and it gives bad vibes.
I don't think he was meant to be likable. Because again, the first shot you see of him is killing a small bird for no reason. Like he just looks out the window and looks and kills something. So he would make a good cop, I guess.
And see, that's really interesting because yes, the director made all of those shots like really specifically, right? Like him shooting the bird, killing the chicken with his hands without even like it's second nature to him. The horse, he has some affection for the horse, but it's still like it's not a lot. Wanting the dog to bite. There's all these elements that tell us, well, what are they telling us? That he's a little bit disturbed, maybe might have some mental issues. I think that you can read that into it. But what other things might those scenes be telling us about Lucien?
He's childish.
It's very childish. Kyra?
Yeah, you can tell that his family life isn't at all like a good one. It's not like, I don't say it's not normal because it is post-war, and everything is different, but he gets kicked out of his house basically. I don't even know how old he is. He could be like 16 to 20 maybe, but he ends up getting kicked out of his home because his mother is dating a new man. And I don't know how many people can relate to that. I mean, not now, I hope not, but I know like a lot of people who have been kicked out of their home because their mother has dated a new person. It's kind of an interesting family dynamic. And I would say that he is pretty childish because throughout the rest of the movie, you see that he really doesn't know anything about the world. He's kind of just a farm boy, I guess.
So a couple of key things there. I don't know if everybody caught that at the beginning, but he does have a very unstable home life. He's been sent to work in town, right? Initially, we see him working in the hospital, and then he's going to find his role with the German police. But his dad, they hint at, is a POW in Germany during this time. So his dad, the hint that his dad, was serving in the army, that probably in that initial loss at the beginning of the occupation, and most of those POWs remain in Germany throughout the war. In the meantime, his mom has found somebody else, right? So yeah. And the other thing, did you guys catch that? I felt like some of what he does didn't seem too abnormal to me, even with the animals. Yeah, he is odd in the way he does it, but a lot of those actions in themselves are really just farm life, no?
Yeah, he's just hunting to eat. The way he kills them is a little eccentric, but it's just farm boy.
Yeah, but I'm like, those actions in themselves. I remember the first time I went to Mexico and I saw my mom kill a chicken, and I was just like, whoa, what are you doing?
Yeah,
And-
it seemed like he had a lot of, I mean, it seemed like a necessity, but he had a little bit too much joy, I think. But I also felt that was big on his character development for when he's ready to leave and he's basically getting kicked out. And I feel like the way he was killing made it feel like he knew that he had more to life than to be a farm boy.
And see, Cara, what you have just given us there is an interpretation, a very good interpretation of what's happening there, right? So that's a very good interpretation of it. But you all might have a slightly different version of how you saw that, and that's what I'm looking for in the paper. Odalis in the chat made a really good point. He likes power over the animals. Did anybody else catch that? An element of power dynamics happening?
Yeah, most definitely, Dr. Cardona, because like I mean, even in the beginning scene, right? Like the bird is being a bird, right? Relaxing on the branch, probably thinking about life, and then like here comes the dude and just like with his slingshot and just murders it.
And I think that the evidence of that is not just in those scenes, but also later on. Like Joanna, what you say that he's very, very, very man-like. The way he reacts when they try to tell him that he's like just a kid, to me tells us like, whoa, this is about masculinity for him. At least that was one of my interpretations of it. Every time I watch this movie, I have a different interpretation. This time, the manliness aspect just jumped off at me. Right? Even early on, like you have to know that his dad's not around and he considers himself like the man of the house, even though he's not really in the house and his mom has other men around. But there's an element, I think, of like, this is how men behave. This is what men do. And more of like him acting out what he thinks he needs to do. I don't know. But yeah, Kala?
Yeah, Dr. Cardona, I was just gonna ask if like there's also like a sense of like a threat on his intellect, because I mean I don't want to like go too forward, right? But like there's like a scene where somebody asks like, oh, what was he doing before? What was he doing before the war? He's like, oh, I was studying. And like, what were you studying? And he gets all mad, like, oh, I could have all of you arrested or something like that. So is there like a threat on his intellect?
Yeah, he does often want to appear smarter than he is, right? More in control than he is. And because being a member of the German police, working for the German police, does give him a lot of power. Right? A lot of
Yeah,
power.
I felt when he got defensive was like that was because he was starting to have power. Like, yeah, it was probably a lot of intellect because I don't know if he's as smart, as everyone else, but I think him being with the German police and seeing all the power that he was handling, he felt that he could do it. Like, remember when he was courting the girl, the Taylor's daughter, France, and he just took her out of the line that she was in and was like, I'm German police, make her go inside. That also shows his low intelligence as well. He doesn't even know that he can't do that.
Yeah, because he's like, I can physically do it. It doesn't realize, but that makes her stand out. That puts her in danger. Like he's not thinking through the action. Yeah, absolutely. So what do we think then? Why is he working for the German police?
He really just kind of wanted something to do. I think because when you see, he originally tried to join the underground. He's like, I want to do something, He tried to join the underground and they're like, no. So then he found something else. And I think it's really interesting how he's always looking for self-preservation. You know, he has no loyalty to anyone. I think the most evident scene is at the end. You know, he's like, okay, you know, I want France around, so I'm gonna shoot this German soldier and just run away. Like he's like, yeah, I don't really care about anyone else. I only care about my. He really does, for the most part, only care about himself. I mean, he only likes France because, you know, he just uses her for sex. I mean, he doesn't really talk to her about anything. You know, he kind of just wants someone there for him. I think he
I
kind
don't
of just
think
likes
he
having her.
understands. He probably just doesn't understand. He's not empathetic. And I don't know if it's like a sociopath, or I don't even think he's a narcissist. Like he doesn't understand emotions, and he just, like you said, he just cares about himself. And that's
Yeah,
it.
that's what people are saying in the chat too, that he's selfish. But when Susana, that's a really good point, that a lot of it is him feeling not in control. And he knows that aggression gives him control, some level of control, or makes him feel in control. Yeah. Oh, and Jeremiah, emotional intelligence. Yeah, there's very little emotional intelligence there, right? I mean, he cares for his mother, right? Anybody else he really cares about? He doesn't really care about France, does he?
I don't think. I mean, I think he's more using her than actually caring about her.
It's more like an infatuation with her.
And it's sad because France is like kind of dependent on him. Like she really becomes super dependent on him, and like he's all she kind of has, and she just kind of accepts it. She's like, oh, this is what I got.
But
Yeah.
doesn't she kind of have to be, being a woman at that time? Like, it's not like she could just.
No, the boss saying she was courted by many other men. Only when he acted childish did she really like try to stick with him.
Yeah,
Pulled her away.
Her so before we get to her, yeah, him not caring when, like, you know, people he knows are getting arrested, getting tortured, getting killed. These are people
But
that,
he's also responsible for those people getting arrested. So
but yet his reaction's like, no, almost like no reaction, like, oh, I'm noting that happened. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it mattered what side he was on, Professor. He could have been a rebel, and I think he would have still kind of done the same actions. You know, it just happened to be that he was with the German police.
Yeah.
Odilas brings up a good point. That scene was unclear to me.
Oh yeah, dude, he definitely did. After the slapping,
It feels like he just wanted a place to belong. Well, the underground wouldn't take me. The German police are taking me, so I'm taking this side.
Yeah. And then the what I was saying is the sex, the amount of consent possible in that can, I mean, it's open to interpretation in a way, because the I don't think the filmmaker tells us yes or no, or maybe yes because of the way he portrays some of what happens afterwards. But I think her ability to say no is very limited. Like, she can't really say no. On the other hand, so then let's talk about it. If you don't write about Lucien, another really good character to write about is France. What's motivating her? Why is she, I mean, there's a level of, like, you know, she can't say no to this guy because she's Jewish. So all he has to do is say the word, and she and her father get arrested and sent to a concentration camp. So why is she sticking around with him? Why does she want at times to be with him? Or maybe or did anybody interpret as like, no, she doesn't really.
By the end, I couldn't tell her feelings towards him.
Yeah.
There's one scene where they're at a party or something in the German police house, and so I think there's some interpretation where, like, oh, like although it's kind of iffy, I understand that, right? It's an iffy relationship, and it's weird, but you know, there's a lot of aspect of the main character's protection for France, right? There's his cycling hero is being very handsy, sexually violent, and the main character, I forget his name. I'm sorry. I know we were just talking about it, but he just pushes him off, and like, hey, what are you doing, man? And then and the previous woman, he had a liaison, he had a sexual interaction with, called France, uh, a dirty Jew. She will give you syphilis, and like it's that aspect of like, like, go away, you're crazy. So there's that protection element, I think. So maybe Francis sees the main character in some aspect as a protector.
As a protector, maybe an element in there in that he does step in there, but does he step in because he cares about her?
No, because he like kind of like is like, nah, I own you. I mean, he doesn't exactly like necessarily like, he's not as direct with it, but he's basically saying like, dude, step off. This is my girl.
I think he stepped in when she started trying to get violent with her.
See, and I would be interested.
It wasn't necessarily the insults.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear.
Oh, I was talking about like the dude with the bicycle dude. I'm talking about what was the glass eye woman's name? Marie?
I don't remember off the top of my head. Susanna, you have your hand up. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a complicated relationship between them, but I also think they both share a kind of loneliness, because France is isolated and she has to stay in hiding most of the time, and she doesn't really get to communicate or interact with anyone. And then here comes this guy who's I think he's younger than her, but they're close in age, and he can take her out, and he's kind of a distraction. And for him, well, he doesn't really have a family, and he doesn't really have anywhere to go. And even though he's with this German army, he's not really a part of them because he's still just this kid. And they're really his educators right now. He's being taught how to just become another soldier in their army, but he's not really treated as a person. So maybe, I think he also gains a curiosity with the tailor, and he wants to be a part of that family. He kind of pretends that he lives there in a way. So it's like he's trying to borrow this moment of having a family, even though it's under threat. So it's not really consensual necessarily, but it's like this small moment for him, and it won't last. So it makes it even more tragic. But all of these people are just human and dealing with a situation that nobody could have foreseen, and they're just doing their best to survive on both sides, I think, anyway.
Yeah, I think there's an element of there, right? Because nobody really comes off as a true, like, I really like this person, or I'm like really, really rooting for them. Like France is, and this is why I think writing about France would be interesting for some of you to do, because her actions are open to interpretation. Why is she doing what she's doing? Is it she just is, it's like she's been in quarantine, right? It's like for all this time, because she can't go out too much. Any outing is incredibly dangerous for her. And yet, she's young and she wants to go out, and that there's an element of like wanting to rebel against her father too, right? When she chooses to go to this party, even though Lucienne was kind of wanting her to, there's an element of her also wanting to do it, and the ways in which she puts herself in danger are interesting in terms of why is she doing that. She doesn't care about Lucienne. She doesn't have a lot of emotional feelings for him, right?
I think those you only live once type ideals. Like we talk about that a lot, like even though we're not in wartime, but people still feel like, oh, going to a party, that's risky. People still feel that way today. And then, they have their prep talks and they're saying, you only live once, you're only young once. So that could have been her interpretation. Maybe.
Yeah, I think she's really interesting there, because she puts her family at risk by like wanting to go out with this guy. Like, it's not just her, it's her father and her grandmother. Mm-hmm. But there is that element of like, also she's young, right? And she's trapped in this situation she has no control over. To rebel against her father, or at least they are I think there's an element of rebelliousness that I sensed in her character. Yes, because I'm like, some of that risk is really unnecessary, but she still does it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just that at that level of maturity that everyone is gonna have, like she can't go past that level of maturity when she's never been there. You know, I think every story and a character, they have to go past this point where it's like, you know, where she risks everything, like you said. So I don't think she could have gotten past it without taking that step.
Yeah. So I think what most of us are then in agreement that what motivates a lot of the characters we're seeing is not really a lot of political conviction. We see people that do have political conviction, but they're kind of minor characters in the story, right? Who are truly believing in, are anti-Semites, who are believers in Nazi ideology, and then the resistance, the true believers in the resistance, they kind of are in the periphery. Right? Would you say that most people are not politically motivated here? So it's other things that then motivate them. And I think that's one of the things that the filmmaker wants to show, that, hey, there were people that did things, not because they believed in the ideologies, just because of all kinds of weird, everyday kind of reasoning. And yet, they had really real consequences, right? Like, even if you were not a true believer, your actions led to people dying. Right? I don't know. For me, that's why I'm like, I can't like Lucien. I can't like France even. I can't like them entirely, because I'm like, your actions are getting other people, like putting people at risk or getting them killed. So yeah, you're not a true believer, but like, you're still part of the problem. And that's one of the things about these populations in which you have a majority of the people that are either accommodating to the regime or actively collaborating with the regime, right? Some of them might have had, personal reasons for it, even valid reasons for why they're doing what they're doing, and yet the consequences are still negative consequences. Like, their actions result in bad things happening to other people.
Was there a neutral take in the movie where nobody collaborated and nobody resisted? I don't think there was.
I don't think so.
I mean, Albert, he didn't exactly resist in any way. He kind of like, he was like, okay, I'll be your tailor. Try and get me to Spain, please. I want to get out of here. I mean, he wasn't necessarily like, he never like, he had opportunities where like he totally could like shot one of them, like shot one of the Germans, but he never did. He always just chilling in his pajamas like a G.
And I can never understand his reasoning for giving all of this information when he said he was going to turn you in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point. I've never thought that much about Albert, but he's an interesting one. At first, I mean, it's part of his motivation is clear in that, like, his life's in danger, right? But his wealth has given him some opportunities, some chances with these people.
Also, a few of the characters refer to Albert as the wealthy Jew, but he doesn't look wealthy. Neither does his living accommodations. It looks like he's struggling.
And at that point, he kind of is. I mean, having to pack the whole family in like that was not how they would have lived before the war. But there is a level of, like, he has things. He's been allowed to keep certain things. And he's allowed to, like, he wasn't immediately deported, and that was because of those that money he has. Right, he's essentially paying them off. Right? He's paying them. Yeah, he's paying them off, and that delays something that really is inevitable, because these people are never going to give him papers to get out of France. Right? They're just not. They're just milking him for anything they can get out of him, and then the association with Lucien does put him in trouble at the end. So okay, let's talk about that ending. Should I go? Let me see if I can queue up that ending on the Google Drive. I think this
One
is
thing
one-
about Albert, though, just one thing I want to say really quick is just like the way how at the end he kind of just like he's like, yeah, I'm basically going to give myself up just to try and tell him like something about France that we never get to know.
Yes. So in the end, he ends. So they end up in the hills, right? One, they do this because Lucien is doing this. He's the driver of like, all right, it's time to get out of the house. It's time to, we're in danger, and he wants to protect France. He wants to protect her, right? But she won't go without the rest of the family, without the grandma, right? So they
What do I
end up-
refer to the grandma? It's just Grandma Albert.
Albert is good enough for me. I'll try and see if there's a name for her somewhere. But then they end up here, and it's idyllic to some extent, right? When they're up there. Let me see if this will play. It's playing. So they get up here. They find oh, here we go. The scenes of like out here in the wilderness. He knows how he's the right person to have with you, right? He can catch rabbits and birds. I always forget how like chill the grandma is. I'm like, I mean, what else are you gonna do? I suppose you can play cards. Oh, he's cleaning his gun.
Yeah, I thought it was funny how she threw his when he bought France a bottle of champagne, the box of champagne, and he gave her some to be polite, you know, to introduce himself, and she just tosses it out. I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, I'm like, and this. Let me just get to the ending, so just make sure that everybody saw it, because at the ending, you know, they live like they show us. The filmmaker shows us a lot of scenes of just them out in the wilderness like that, and it almost gives you the impression that maybe things are going to be all right for them. Or I don't know. What was
You gotta
your
go back like
impression?
10 seconds.
Yeah, I'm like, hold on. There we go. Yeah. I went too far, didn't I?
A bit.
Yeah, because it's after the scene where he does stuff to her on the hay.
Okay, at this point, I can just let it play. It's two minutes, a minute and a half.
Yeah, it happens right after this. So to clarify, we could write the paper on anybody in the movie. So if I just wanted to write about how the grandma just never says a word and chill, that's fine too.
Yes. And actually, if you want to pick a side character, you might need to pick two to get to the 2 pages, and you can do that.
Okay.
That would be fine with me. So there is. So he does manage to live through the Allies coming in. So that's actually noteworthy because a lot of members of the Vichy regime and people that worked with the German police directly, the way Lucien does, they were killed with before there's any government reestablished in France. The resistance comes out of the hills, right, to reestablish control over their towns and villages. And in those early days, a lot of people who collaborated were just shot and killed because everybody knew who had done it, right? Who had collaborated. So someone like Lucien, if he'd been in town, he would have immediately been shot and killed because everybody knew what he'd been doing before that. So he actually manages to survive out there for quite a while. So he actually does get arrested and gets there's some formality after at the end of the war once a more formal government is established in France where he's found guilty and executed. I mean, this is not based on a real story. There's probably various versions of Lucien out there, but that's what would have happened to a lot of these people. What do you think about that? Do you think, yeah, Kenny?
Viva la France.
Yeah. Also notice all the gender stuff with France. I was like, oh my God, you couldn't have been more on the nose. Like Louis Malle naming her France and having her like be a Jewish girl, but that looks completely like Aryan, right? With the blonde hair, like all the nice features. She looks like the epitome of like French femininity, right? And it's desired by all the men she encounters. And because she's Jewish, that does not protect her. Her beauty does not protect her. It puts her in danger from physical and sexual abuse from these men.
Professor, I found it also interesting how I couldn't tell who was French and who was German. And like as an outsider, that was like pretty big for me because I'm sitting here and I'm like, okay, who are the bad guys? And it had to get me until, further into the movie where the bike guy who was the head of the German police ends up killing someone, and they were flashing badges. That's when I realized that they were German. And so I just wanted to know. Oh, and besides Mama, if everyone remembers Mama, her hairstyle kind of reminded me of Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark's women's hairstyle, signifying that they were German. But to me, that was the only indicator I saw. So I wanted to know if there were any other indicators that I guess French people could tell. Like, how did the director identify this?
So no, I think you've caught onto something that I hadn't really thought about explicitly, but yes, you initially don't know. And I think he's doing that on purpose because a lot of the people we see that are French are working for the German police, right? Like a lot of the people that Lucien encounters when he's in the hotel with them and hanging out at all the parties, a lot of them are French, right? And we can't tell them apart who's French and who's German, those, unless you're paying attention to what they're saying whenever they're not speaking French. But most of the time, I don't think you can tell them. The uniforms, when you see them in uniform, that's how everyone can tell. During that time, people would have known. A lot of the Germans don't speak French or speak limited French, and it's with an accent. So at the time, everyone would have known. The uniforms were clear. It was also very clear who was in charge and who was not in every town and every village, in part by what they look, where they live, how they behave, and also who has access to food, who has access to safety. So in the time they would have known, but for us, even probably for Europeans watching this movie, it's not always clear who's who.
I like how the black guy was a German collaborator. That was a fun twist. There's a little irony there.
Yeah, and also that element of like, okay, there were Black people in France and Germany at this time. And there were people from the colonies even in France during this period. Some of them collaborated, and most of them would have probably resisted just because they would have also been targeted. But that was an interesting choice by the director to even put in a non-white character.
Wait, quick question. Since you speak French, did he have like an accent compared to a regular French person? Like, was he supposed to sound different, or was he supposed to just sound like an average French person?
Oh, I would have to go back and pay attention to his accent. Because honestly, like every time I pay attention, I watch the movie, I pay attention to different things. So it's been a while since I paid attention to him. He was further over here.
Because I remember the phone scene. Like,
Yeah.
I was like trying to see. I was like, does he talk different than the rest of them? Like, is he supposed to be foreign? Like, I just wasn't sure.
I think his
I thought he
accent is
had a French accent.
yeah,
Like
but
I thought he was like a friend of the boss. That's why he was working with him. I don't know how to say it. Like he was born in France, like a French Black.
let me play this and see if I can tell paying attention to it. Here, he's about to talk. His accent is a little bit different than like the family one, but honestly, that could just be regional accents. So that's not a major difference. I can hear a slight difference in his accent to some of the other people, but it's very slight accent. He's probably a native French speaker. Yeah. So I can't say for sure because I'm not an expert on French accents, but I think I detect a slightly different accent in the way he's talking. But it's something where you would have to really be familiar with French accents to be able to tell that. So then he is justly shot for his hypocrisy. And let me see other comments. Taking France offended the Nazis, and then the Nazis just steals the watch after the dragon. Yes. Yeah. So there's a whole lot of just people like profiteering and like just doing things because it's what suits them in the moment, right? That I think is offensive to us. Like if you're gonna do it, at least believe in what you're doing. But I think for me at least, partly what Louis Malle is trying to say is like, no, people just did it for all kinds of reasons. Like they saw a benefit to themselves in behaving the way they did. Yeah. Anything else? Any other scenes or themes that jumped out at you from the film?
I just wanted to say that I found it really interesting how they used the radio throughout the film. That even when they were at the hotel, they were talking about how you couldn't trust what the news was saying, that you would have to hear the London news and then kind of piece together what was true and what wasn't true about whether or not the Germans were succeeding or whether the Allies were actually invading. And it's, I think there's only like 3 times when you hear the radio, but it's always the same that no, the Germans are there, they're still fighting and they're still resisting. And it's not true. The Allies are actually making progress. So it's kind of, they're trying to isolate the information. So it was a small detail, but I thought it was really interesting the way they used it.
That's a good catch because actually radio communication and radio as a medium was really important during World War II, right? And so controlling radio signals was really important, especially in occupied regions. That's one of the things that Charles de Gaulle from London is using to try to communicate with people in France, was via radio signals. But not everybody has a radio, right? Actually, it's a big deal if you had a radio. And so most people are not listening to Charles de Gaulle, they're listening to the propaganda that is coming out from the German signals, which is telling lies, right? The whole time, by the way, up until the end, the information they're giving people is that everything's fine. The Germans are doing well, all the while the Allies are advancing. Right? So that's an important element. Yeah, how France Marie keeps talking, the Americans are going to win. At that point, once the Americans land in Normandy, I mean, and it's primarily the Americans, although there are British and Canadian troops and some French troops as well. It's mainly the Americans, and I mean, our American entrance into the war was a big deal, and it really turns around the fronts that are opened up in France and in North Africa.
Yeah, the scene where Maurice tells Lucien that, you know, the Americans are gonna win in their first sexual encounter, I found it interesting how he didn't reply, and like he didn't say anything.
Yeah, and actually the whole time you don't really see him. He doesn't even react. He doesn't react to anyone.
And it just made me like, okay, so is he not political, or does he just not understand what's happening? Because when that scene with the tailor and he was saying, oh, do you want plaid or this blue? He was like, I don't care. You know, I don't care. And then another scene with the tailor, and he's talking about his golf pants. And then he was silent that whole time until he said, I don't know what golf pants are. What are golf pants? Caleb, stop taking the words out of my mouth. Okay.
The same way. No, that golf pants scene is really, it kind of shows like just how immature or childish he is, like in how he's playing a part. He's trying to play a part of an adult, a mature adult. Like, and the golf pants are a great example of that, because I'm like, he doesn't know what the hell you're dressing him in. Susie?
But what I thought, continuing with the golf pants, but it seems like with Frances, he was trying to be very mature when she was around, because when he does ask, Albert asks him about his golf pants, he's like, no, I don't like him. Like, before he probably wouldn't have an opinion, or I don't care. Now it's like, no, I don't like him. I hate them.
Yeah, no, that's true. He's definitely, yeah, Cameron?
I gotta think about his intelligence, because the only teacher he probably knew was teaching elementary school. So he might not even know what golf is, to be honest. Might not know it's a sport. So he might just be ignorant to the world around him. He might, I think he knows there's a war going on, since he's just interested in the killing that's going around. But other than joining his side, I wouldn't say he knew what the war was going about, to be honest. It's an ignorance to the situation around him.
Yeah, and like not wanting or not having the capacity to be able to register that. I think you're right about that. I mean, it's open to interpretation. You guys can disagree, but I think there's an element of either he doesn't want to know, or he just is not capable of knowing.
The scene where he I think he's talking to Albert. I can't remember, but he's talking about Jewish people. He's like, oh, John Bernard, I can't remember his name, something like that. Jean Bernard. He told me that Jews are blah 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 blah, and like he's like, he doesn't even know. He doesn't get it. He doesn't understand why the Jews are being persecuted. He doesn't understand any of it. He just kind of he's very in the present. You know, he doesn't really think about why things are the way they are.
Repeating rumors he hears about someone to the person he heard it about.
Yeah, exactly. I thought the scene that was really funny was when he like bragged about shooting someone. He's like, I shot someone. It's like, he's like, oh, I'm so cool. Like,
and he's talking to Albert about Jew stuff, like, oh, you're a Jew, like, and saying like, you know, just, I can't remember exactly, but basically asking him about all of this stuff that, you know, people should already know, I guess, at that point. And Albert was just like, I don't know. I felt like he was just surviving. Like, I'm not going to say nothing. Not this crazy kid is probably going to kill me for it.
Yeah, didn't he say like, didn't Albert say like, oh, I'm not like them? Like, I'm pretty sure he said that.
Not all Jews are enemies or something.
Yeah, but I think he said specifically that he was not one of those.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was the level of like, yeah, that was one of the shocks to the system that, you know, for wealthy people that class had protected them from a lot of discrimination. And in this case, it was not, it was so, or it could only protect you so much, right? Wealth and class. Because with the deportations, it didn't matter, right? Unless you could pay someone off, they didn't care.
I guess class can also play into it. Lucien's like the lowest class. But then I guess there are no classes when the regime's on top. So.
And I think that's a level of like his attraction to France, right? This is a girl that if this situation, you know, if they were not living through the situation, he would never have access to her, ever, right? Class-wise, and just their paths would have never crossed otherwise, right? She's somebody that would have been completely inaccessible to him, but here he has control over that. He has a level of power over that family. Yeah. So perfect. What I'm hearing from all of you is exactly what I want to hear in your papers. Right? It's exactly what I want to hear in your papers. So I'm excited to see the things that you will write. Remember then the main thing is you have to have an argument, a clear argument at the beginning, at the end of the introduction. And then in the conclusion, don't forget that you have a little bit more space to play with the conclusion, to talk about maybe connections to today, and to give more of your thoughts or include, you know, other characters and their connections to the main character that you are analyzing. So things like that would make for interesting conclusions. And that you can send me a draft. I haven't gotten any drafts yet, but feel free to send me drafts, or even if you just send me your thesis statement to take a look at. I would gladly take a look at anything you sent. Just send it to me 24 hours before it's due. So Saturday, if you send it to me Saturday by midnight, I will read it and get back to you. And if there are any questions, citation, please don't hesitate. Seriously, any confusion, I will put the recording of this class up so that